It's astonishing to realize that more than 30 years have passed since the end of the 1980s, and the world has undergone significant changes since then. In this video, we'll take a nostalgic look back at some aspects of the 1980s that kids can no longer engage in. While kids today may still have art classes, the projects they undertake are quite different. In the past, there was a focus on crafting items that served practical purposes, such as the classic old-fashioned ashtray. Though intended as gifts for smoking parents or grandparents, these ashtrays were once considered thoughtful gestures of affection. Before the era of inkjet and laser printers, there were noisy dot matrix printers. These machines utilized special paper with perforated holes on the sides to facilitate printing. Once the printing was complete, tearing each sheet of paper along the perforations and removing the hole punch sides was a laborious process, though it seemed efficient at the time. Saturday mornings held a special allure for children in the 1980s. They would eagerly rise early to indulge in a ritual of sitting in front of the television with a bowl of sugary cereal, enjoying cartoons until lunchtime unless parental intervention intervened. Cereal in the 80s was synonymous with a variety of sugary options that parents didn't mind as long as it kept the kids entertained. Overall, the glimpses into the 1980s childhood evoke a sense of nostalgia and highlights the profound changes in societal norms and technological advancements over the past 3 decades. Cereal boxes in the past were packed with entertainment, featuring artwork, puzzles, stories, and games, along with exciting prizes inside. Siblings often competed fiercely to be the first to claim these treasures, adding a playful challenge to breakfast time. Before the era of wireless phones, landline phones were connected to a base with a coiled cord. These cords were not only practical, but also served as perfect fidget items, as many people found themselves wrapping them around their fingers or even playing with them like a toy. However, the downside was the lack of privacy, as multiple phones in a household shared the same line, allowing for the potential of eavesdropping on conversations. Playgrounds in the 1980s were notably different from today's soft, cushioned environments. Constructed primarily of metal, they posed significant risks with their solid steel structures, which could heat up in the summer and cause severe burns. Sharp edges and hard surfaces meant that falls could result in serious injuries, making each playground visit an adventure fraught with danger. While computers have become indispensable in modern households and education systems, their presence was far less common in the 1980s. Back then, having even one computer at home was considered a luxury, and familiar with DOS-based operating systems were limited. Unlike today's children, who often start using computers before kindergarten, learning to navigate these early computers was a slow and unfamiliar process for many. Safety standards in the 1980s differed notably, especially when compared to earlier years of the decade. By the mid-80s, mandatory seatbelt laws were just beginning to be implemented. Prior to this, it was common for kids to ride in the bed of pickup trucks or to be crammed into the back of station wagons, where bouncing and sliding around was considered part of the adventure. With the introduction of seatbelt laws, adults faced the challenges of accommodating more children than available seatbelts, often resorting to buckling multiple kids into a single seatbelt. Children in the 80s were encouraged to spend time outdoors, particularly after Saturday morning cartoons ended. Parental expectations were clear. Kids were expected to go outside and explore, with staying indoors not being an option. Supervision was minimal, allowing kids the freedom to roam far from home without constant parental oversight, provided they returned before the streetlights came on. School playgrounds weren't the only places where kids faced challenges. Physical education classes also featured demanding activities. Dodgeball, for example, was a mandatory part of many PE curriculums, with participation often impacting students' grades. While the game provided a unique sensory experience, its rough nature has led to its discontinuation in many schools today. Similarly, activities like wall ball could also be physically demanding and tough. In the 1980s, Apple Watches were non-existent, and kids were content with basic digital watches from brands like Casio or Timex. Owning a calculator was considered especially cool, as it defied teachers' predictions that calculators wouldn't be readily available everywhere. Remember the Goots watch? They resembled a regular digital watch but could transform into a robot, gaining popularity until Swatch watches took over the market with their colorful designs and customizable features. Chalkboards were a staple in every classroom, despite their messiness. There was always that one mischievous kid who enjoyed running their fingernails across the chalkboard, much to the chagrin of classmates. Although chalkboards have largely disappeared from schools, some attribute it to the rise of computers, while others cite health concerns like asthma. However, one fond memory for many kids was the opportunity to go outside and bang erasers to remove chalk, providing a welcome break from class. Waterbeds gained popularity in the 70s and remained prevalent in many households throughout the 80s. Floating on water while sleeping was an unusual sensation, yet many found it relaxing. And if you didn't have one yourself, chances are you knew someone who did. In the 1980s, peanut butter was a ubiquitous staple in kids' diets, featured in candies, cookies, crackers, and the beloved peanut butter and jelly sandwiches brought to school. However, due to allergies, many schools now prohibit peanut butter items, a concept unfamiliar to most kids of that era. For those with peanut allergies, it must have also been a particularly daunting time. Bicycles were an essential part of the 80s childhood, with BMX bikes reigning supreme. Riding these bikes and attempting daring jumps provided a sense of freedom and endless adventure for kids. Bicycles also served as a gathering spot, indicating where neighborhood kids could be found. Without cell phones, kids in the 80s engaged in various activities outdoors, such as roller skating, bowling, and mall outings. Mastering the payphone was a necessary skill, with kids using collect calls to inform parents that they were ready to come home. Today, encountering a payphone is rare, and it's unlikely that modern kids have ever used one. Valentine's Day celebrations in schools during the 80s were markedly different from today. While modern protocols often require kids to bring enough cards for everyone in the class, back then, children had the freedom to choose recipients, turning into a social contest to see who received the most. For kids growing up today, this may seem like a completely different world, but it was a beautiful time characterized by more first-hand experiences and less reliance on computer screens. Do you have any fond memories of the 80s? Share them with us in the comments below. Thanks for watching.